This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
We now come to part of the syllabus which deals with strategic planning. Strategic planning means long-term planning. You're looking for something like 5 or 10 years. It's not next year's budget. And before we get into the theory, it's worthwhile just looking at some generally well-known companies who may have had planning problems in the past. And also to think, well, maybe where did they go wrong? What sort of variety of errors perhaps could they have made? And the first one is IBM. And in the 1980s, IBM was one of the largest companies in the world. It was second only to the large oil companies. It was the Apple of its day. But within about 5 years, from around 1980 to around 1985-86, something of that sort, it went from a predominantly successful position to a situation where people at one time thought it might seriously have to go into liquidation. Now, what did such a powerful, almost monopolistic company, what did it do wrong? And to some extent was a victim of technology, even though it was a technology company, that around 1980, 81, 82, personal computers became widely available. It was around then that the first Apple machines became available. And IBM was a company which had specialized in very large commercial computers, filling entire rooms and floors of buildings. And really they couldn't understand why people would be happy with a small desktop computer, or indeed why they would want them at home. And then shortly after that, networks were available, and people could share work, share information and so on. And IBM simply didn't work quickly enough to adjust the way in which it was manufacturing very large machines and seeing how the technological innovations had really turned the way people wanted to buy machinery. To cut a very long story short, IBM doesn't make personal computers anymore. It did try to do it, but it was rather over-costed and not the best specifications. And it did for a while, but about 10 years ago it sold its personal computer business to Lenovo, who were able to make personal computers sufficiently cheaply to make a profit on them. IBM changed its strategy and now is effectively in the business of supplying services, computing services. And whereas laptop and desktop computers have become commodities and have been really beaten down on very sensitive, very stiff price competition, services you can still say to people, look, here's my reputation, rely on me, I'm going to give you a unique service, and it's safe to go with me, and you can still get a large markup. You probably also remember Nokia, and about 10 years ago, Nokia phones were really about the most popular in the world. And then within about 2 years, more or less the brand Nokia disappeared. There the reason was, again, technology, that they were wed to a particular operating system. Smartphones came along, particularly iPhones, and when people saw they could easily text or access the internet and listen to music and so on their phone, Nokia had been left behind. BlackBerry perhaps is facing a similar kind of dilemma. It has a little bit of a niche in the business market, but whether or not will actually survive in the face of increasingly competitive mobile phones and indeed secure mobile connections is still open to question. Kodak. You may remember Kodak. It had been a very famous, again, almost monopolistic company. There was Kodak and Fujichrome, which made what I called old-fashioned 35mm films. films that you put in a 35mm camera, rolls of celluloid with kind of light sensitive dye on it, and you could produce negatives, prints, slides, and so on. No prizes for guessing what their problem was. Again, it was an advance of technology and the digital cameras. Kodak saw that digital cameras were going to eat into their market. They predicted a fall in their market of about 10% per annum, but it was actually about 30% per annum. They tried to get into producing digital cameras themselves, but the problem that Kodak had was that although it made very good films, it made some cameras which were really very much down at the bottom of the market. It was almost buy my film and we'll give you a very basic camera to run the film through and to take photographs. And when they tried to make upmarket cameras, and they actually made very good cameras, people would say, why would I spend $400, $500, $600 buying a Kodak digital camera when they could buy a Canon or Nikon or Olympus digital camera, something which had a real brand name and reputation in that sort of market. Kodak's still kind of stumbling about a little bit. It's not really in the film market or camera market anymore. The last I heard, it was inventing some sort of cryptocurrency to try to rival Bitcoin. Uber you will know about. Uber was a company which had meteoric rise, along with companies like Airbnb. And Uber, of course, allowed people to hail taxis and for taxis to be hired much more cheaply, and you could follow them around on your mobile phone to see where the taxi was, how close it was to you, and so on. So that was an opportunity coming through technology. Unfortunately, there seemed to be certain cultural problems within the company, particularly with the founder and the previous chief executive officer, and there were incidents of not treating drivers fairly. There were some doubts about how well drivers had been vetted to be safe with members of the public. And also it has to be said that there were many conventional taxi businesses who lobbied governments and so on to keep these upstarts out, even though the upstarts, had it possibly been properly managed, would have given a perfectly good and adequate and safe taxi service. So most of these have suffered or been caused through changes in technology, but it isn't always that. It can be changes in taste. It can be changes in perhaps the reputation of a company, which is there. It can be changes in the economy in which the company is trading, so that its upmarket luxury goods are simply not affordable anymore. But what it shows is even the best regulated companies can go astray. Strategic planning is certainly no guarantee that you're going to be around in the future, but we'll argue strongly that strategic planning gives you the best chance of being around in the future.